Welcome to the Not Okay with Gray podcast, where our intention is to empower men and women to change their mindsets about aging so they can make the rest of their lives the best of their lives. This podcast is designed to be a dose of high-octane motivation and inspiration that propels you to embrace the idea that you really aren't aging. What you're actually doing is evolving, and through your evolution, the longer you live, the better you become at living. Our goal is to empower you to create the life of your dreams because you're never too old to build a life that you love. We want you to build a life of joy, passion, and purpose, filled with inner peace, dynamic health, great relationships, and financial abundance. This is what it means by saying, I'm not okay with gray. So, if you're ready to begin the journey of transformation, which will lead you to authentic happiness, it's time to get started with your host, Coach Michael Taylor, the irrepressible optimist with a passion for the impossible.
Hello and welcome to the Not Okay with Gray podcast, where the intention is to empower men and women to change their mindsets and attitudes about aging so they make the rest of their lives the best of their lives. So I want to share from one of the chapters in my book, I'm Not Okay with Gray, How to Create an Extraordinary Life After 50. And this chapter was called Embrace Connection. And the chapter is about relationships and how to create great relationships. And so I guess the best place to start for me to share about relationships is to start and explain why I had such difficulty with relationships before I began my journey of transformation. So I'll go back to being married. And when I was married, I did everything society says a man was supposed to do to be a great husband, which was to provide, protect, and procreate. And so unfortunately, in our society as men, that's what we're conditioned to do. We're conditioned to do the 3 P's, procreate, provide, and protect. But what society doesn't teach us as men, in a lot of cases, and this also applies to women, but for men mostly, is that we don't know how to connect. And that's the reason I think so many of us struggle with relationships. So after my divorce, I really struggled with relationships. And I noticed this amazing pattern. And the pattern was my relationship would last 2 to 3 weeks tops. And the women would all leave saying the same thing, which was, I care too much about you to stay in this relationship. Now, at the time, that made absolutely no sense to me. If you care about me, why are you leaving? And so initially, when women would say that, I would kind of get defensive and say, well, okay, it's your loss, no problem. And all of a sudden, I realized that I was having a difficult time creating relationships. So I started having this little pity party with myself. And then one day I was talking to a female friend of mine, having this pity party. And she said something that completely changed my perception and outlook about relationships. And it was earth-shattering. It was so profound, it literally changed my life. And here's what she said. Because once again, I was having this pity party about women. And I was saying, you women say you want a good man, and I'm a good man, and why women keep leaving me. And, I was blaming women. I was pointing fingers at women. And my friend said this, Michael, if one person calls you a jackass, you probably shouldn't worry about it. But if 2 or more do, you might want to get a saddle. Have you not noticed that you are the only common denominator in all of your relationships? So maybe it's not the women, maybe it's you. Now, initially, I was going to get defensive. But there was something that how she said it, and of course it was someone that I really trusted, really good friend. But it was something in the way that she said it that really connected and resonated with me. And in that moment, I knew she was right. I knew she was right because what I recognized in that moment was that all of the women when they left and they said the thing about, I care too much about you to stay in this relationship, but they would also say this: a reason I'm leaving is because you're emotionally unavailable. Wow. Now, back then, I had no idea what the heck that meant. What do you mean I'm emotionally unavailable? And when they would say that, I would get defensive. I would tell them how nice I was and how I was, I was okay with monogamy and I was fun and I was intelligent. I gave all the reasons why they should be with me, but I didn't hear what they were saying about my emotional unavailability. But when she said that, it clicked. I had a light bulb moment. I went, wow, maybe it is about me. And it was that conversation that changed my life, because from that moment on, I stopped blaming the women in my life and I took full responsibility of my part in relationships. And I realized that the primary reason that women were leaving me was because of that, my inability to connect on an emotional level. And so from a male perspective, as mentioned, we are taught to think that our responsibilities are procreate, provide, and protect. But what we really want and what women really need is connection. And the only way to have connection is through your emotions, through your feelings. And that's a really difficult stretch for a lot of men, because we're taught to believe that feelings are for women. And unfortunately, as men, a lot of us don't know how to connect. But it isn't until we learn to connect that we can truly create rewarding and fulfilling relationships. And so the key to connection is intimacy. And again, as men, unfortunately, sometimes what we do is we confuse intimacy with sex. And they aren't the same thing. And intimacy is about connection. It's about intimacy, to see the parts of myself that maybe I'm afraid to share and being willing to share them anyway. In other words, it's about being vulnerable and letting that person see inside of me and sharing from my heart, not my head. And once again, from a male perspective, that can be really, really difficult to do. And so in order to embrace connection, we have to be in touch with our emotions, because we can't be relational if we're unwilling to be emotional. And so if you're struggling with relationships, there's the possibility that it's because you have some unresolved emotional baggage that you need to unpack. And so for me, that's what I had to be willing to do. I had to look at and figure out what was the emotional baggage that I was unwilling to unpack. And so I was willing to go to therapy, to uncover, to unpack some of that emotional baggage. And most of that emotional baggage was the result of a very traumatic childhood, which set in motion all of my defense mechanisms that kept me from being able to connect. And so if you're really wanting to create true connection with someone, it's all emotional, it's all spiritual, it's all psychological. In other words, it's your interiority that's going to allow you to connect. It's not your exterior things like what you do, what you drive, what you have. And unfortunately, too many times, that's what we gauge relationships on, externals. But you can't have connection based on externals. Nothing wrong with externals, but they won't allow you to connect. If you truly want to connect, you have to connect emotionally, spiritually, intellectually, psychologically, internally. That's where the gas is. That's where the connection comes from. So if you really want to connect, you got to be willing to do your work. And your work means you become willing to look at those parts of yourself that may be keeping you from connecting with others. Things like intimacy and vulnerability, openness, sensitivity. Those are the keys to creating connection in your relationships. So stop looking outside of yourself. Stop looking outside of your partner. Look within, go within, touch their hearts, touch their minds. That's where true connection comes from. So Think about it. Don't worry about, or don't buy into society standards of procreating, providing, and protecting. Listen to your heart and learn to connect, because true connection is what you truly long for as a human being, because we are wired for connection. It is our beliefs about ourselves that keep us from connecting. So remove the beliefs, unpack your baggage, and you can connect with others. And when you do, your relationships will flourish. Yeah, think about it. We'll see you next episode. Take care.